Good morning, everyone. Just so great to see all of you again this Sunday worship service. I do want to extend a hearty welcome to any newcomer visitor. I know we've been really receiving a steady stream of newcomers, visitors, and we would love to just love you and just to have you feel as welcome as possible, really because we believe that our God loves us and he has welcomed us into his presence. And we want to be able to reflect and reciprocate that to any newcomer, any visitor. Please don't feel like an outsider. My name is Jason Yuh. I have a wife. Her name is Jeannie. 3 kids. They're 10, 7, and 6. The middle child is about to be 8. So that's a little bit about myself. I love sports. I love music. I love reading. But yeah, I would love to get to know you, not just myself, but the rest of the leadership team and really this entire Uptown community. One of the beautiful things here is we are very welcoming, so I'm really thankful for that. I would be remiss not to express once again just my appreciation for some of us who were part of the ordination service last Sunday. I just want to echo the same words of gratitude that I mentioned last week and also during the summer. I just want to thank the Uptown community for the entire ordination process. Like I mentioned, you guys are one of the primary reasons why I went through it, but more importantly, you're one of the reasons why I was able to get through it. This past summer was absolutely brutal, and without your prayers and constantly, every week, I got text messages. Every Sunday, people would ask me, how are the studies going? So yeah, I definitely want to express my gratitude deeply and sincerely. Before we jump into the sermon, I do want to just show this one slide. So if you're part of our impact groups at Uptown, impact group is really the heart and blood of what we do here because that's where we're able to have more of a relational, intimate setting. In our small group formats, we meet throughout the week. And one of the things that we're doing in our impact group curriculum is we are learning about spiritual gifts as well as character development. And one of the things that we did with the impact group leaders, we're calling them disciples, and all the ministry team leaders, we're calling them ministry team disciples. Really, the entire discipleship team, what we did was I had them go through a spiritual gift survey in advance. I know for some of the impact groups, you guys are currently doing that now. But here are some of the results. And I'm not saying that we are a spreadsheet church. Ultimately, we discern the leading of the Spirit, but the Spirit can use information like this. So we went through a spiritual survey, and I crunched the numbers. We created this chart, and these are the results of the leaders, really the discipleship team at Uptown. And it's really interesting how we can use this information, pray through it, discern through it. Obviously, there are other ways of discerning, but this is definitely one piece of the puzzle. It's interesting that we have a lot of people gifted in administration. Some of that might come from just work habits and just the skills that we develop from our corporate job settings. But at the same time, those are gifts that God has given us to use. And we can talk about gifts more. We're talking about them at a deeper level in our impact groups, but I think there is a sermon coming up. But another interesting thing is faith and mercy are also really high on the list. And I would really want to welcome all of you to discern with me because as a discipleship team, as we kind of went through these results, and we're going to have all the members, all the impact group members go through the spiritual survey as well, and then we're going to compile a giant chart of how has God gifted our Uptown community. And it's not just a matter of us feeling good about ourselves. If God has gifted us with certain abilities, then we need to make use of them. Matthew 25 is a classic example. If we don't make use of the resources and the abilities that God has given us, it's not just, oh, I guess we didn't fulfill our potential. No, it is an act of disobedience. So part of it is out of obedience. Obviously, a lot of it is out of joy. That we really want to discern, identify, how has God gifted Uptown? And what does that mean for not only our church, but what does that mean for our greater North York community? How can we utilize our gifts? And something like mercy and helps, hospitality, encouragement, like all those things have a direct correlation in how we can truly be a blessing to the greater community. So yeah, more on that to come. We're going to jump into the sermon. If you've been with us, we are going through a sermon series on 1 Corinthians, which is an ancient letter written 2,000 years ago. But here at Uptown, we believe that these are writings that have been inspired by God, and we can understand the heart of God through a letter that this guy named Paul wrote to the Corinthians 2,000 years ago. And really, the title of today's sermon is Are we people pleasers or are we responding to the gospel? Because if you were here last week, you realize that this portion of the letter, 1 Corinthians chapter 8 all the way to 10, Paul talks a lot about people pleasing. And it really sounds like he's just saying we need to please a bunch of people. But as we looked at it last week and as we're going to look at it again this week, we realize it's not so much people pleasing. It's really about, are we responding to the gospel? Are we responding to the immense, radical, incredible love that Jesus displayed for us? And if so, one of the byproducts of that is we will please people. We will become the pleasure of all humankind. So that is really the topic of today's sermon. We're going to extend what we talked about last week. Let me pray for us one last time, and we'll jump right into the text. Father, we just want to thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to worship you. We know that a lot of people went through a lot of things behind the scenes in order for us to get all of these things right, the band, the AV, but at the end of the day, the one thing that counts is what your Son has done for us. If it weren't for your sacrifice on that cross, if it weren't for his Spirit that is willing us to be in your presence, then all of this is for naught. So thank you so much for the death and resurrection of your Son, Jesus. And we pray that regardless of what passage we look at, what song we sing, what conversation we partake in, may everything come back to your death and your resurrection. Thank you so much. I pray that significant event would truly have implications in every aspect of our lives. We thank you and we pray all these things in your Son's name. Amen. Actually, before we jump into the text, one last housekeeping note is we do Q&A. So if there are any questions that you have, please feel free to text them away. All of this is anonymous, as well as if you have any general prayer requests, we will love to pray for you as well. And we do this all during service. So like I mentioned, the topic of this passage is, are we a bunch of people pleasers? Or are we responding to the gospel? And again, it really sounds like Paul is a people pleaser because look, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 to 27, these are Paul's words. These are not my words. Paul is saying, for though I am free from all, Paul's saying, I'm free. He says, I have made myself, if we can just get back to the sermon. Yeah, if we can let me backtrack here. Okay. For though I am free from all, Paul says, I have actually made myself a servant to all. And actually a more accurate translation is, I have made myself a slave to all people. And why? Why is he being such a people pleaser, trying to become like all these different types of people? Why? It's because he says, so that I might win more of them. And obviously, it's not winning them out of his great personality so that they can see what a charming guy Paul is. As we see later on, Paul is saying, I want to win people for the gospel message. And I know for some of us who are newcomers, visitors, you may not know what the gospel message is, and I'll unpack that in a short while. But Paul is saying, I am willing to do whatever it takes. Last week, we talked about how he forsakes all of his rights in order to be sensitive to the weak. Now he's on the active side. Now he's on the offensive, the passionate side. He's saying, not only am I going to forsake my rights, I'm actually going to become like people in order to win them for the gospel. I want to convince as many people as possible that this Jesus Christ is the real deal. He loves us so much. He has a perfect plan for us, all these wonderful things. And because of that, what does Paul do? I mean, I'm reading his writings. To the Jews, I became as a Jew. He's saying, hey, if my friend is a Jew, I'm going to become like him. I'm going to talk his talk. I'm going to walk his walk. Why? In order to win more Jews. Not only the Jews, he continues, to those under the law. And these are probably people who are really religious, and they are following the law of Moses to the T. And Paul says, hey, if you guys are under the law, you know what? I'm going to become like you. You follow the law to the T, I'll follow the law to the T as well. Why? In order to convince you who Jesus is. He continues down the line, not only to those outside of the law, to those people, I guess in this day and age, it's the Gentiles, people who didn't grow up in the synagogue, people who didn't grow up in church. For those people who are outside the law, I'm going to become like you. I'll dress like you, I'll talk like you, I'll do whatever it takes in order to convince you that Jesus Christ is the real deal. You need to encounter, you need to meet this guy. To the weak, I became weak. If your conscience is weak, I don't know what he means exactly, what it means to be weak, but whatever it takes, I will become like you in order for the sake of the gospel. All of this is so that people can be convinced of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Even in my own life, I remember just like I mentioned maybe a few months ago, when I was a university student, man, I was really trying hard to reach out to different people. And I remember this one guy, man, he was a little bit on the elusive side. And one of the things that I've been trying to do, I would ask him to come out to small group, come out to church week in and week out. Hey, let's grab lunch, let's study together, let me share the gospel. All these different things. And man, nothing was happening. So what I ended up doing is said, hey, I want to room with you. Next year, once our rental is up, let's room together. And I tried to become like this person, did the dishes with this guy, live with this guy. He was really into basketball, so I played a lot of basketball. He was into video games, so I played a lot of video games. I mean, part of it is because I like basketball, I like playing video games. But I did whatever it took to become like this person in order for there to be that one opportunity where he realizes, you know what, this guy, Jason, he's not just trying to make me come out to church for whatever his ulterior motives is. He actually cares about me. He's living with me. He's hanging out with my friends. When I started working, I remember there's this one coworker that I was reaching out to. And this guy, he loved drinking. So, after work, he would always hit up the happy hours. He was also a pretty good musician, so he would do a lot of covers at different bars. And at the time, I was at a church where we were pretty conservative, and I was part of the leadership team. And one of the things that required me of a leader is not to drink alcohol. So I wasn't allowed to drink alcohol. But, hey, this guy, my coworker, he's not going to set foot in church. But what I could do is maybe I can join him at happy hour. Maybe I can visit him as he's doing a cover gig at a bar. And yeah, I'll tell you, it was awkward going to happy hour. And, all my coworkers, a lot of crude jokes, whatever, they're all drinking their favorite drinks, and I'm just sipping on my ginger ale. I love ginger ale, but, they'll make fun of me, and I'm on the younger side as well, so, they'll kind of just give me a hard time about it. And yeah, there were some nights where I could have spent time with my wife, but instead, I checked out my friend's cover, and I wasn't really interested in his music. I guess I'm somewhat of a music snob. I wasn't really too interested in his music, but in order to try to befriend this person, in order to try to build a rapport, I will listen to his music so that I can comment on the way he played and so on and so forth. And slowly but surely, I built a trust with him. And then he actually gave me the opportunity to share the gospel. Another coworker, I guess I will stop talking about my coworkers. I'll give one last example of my wife, Jeannie. I love my wife, Jeannie, and man, we were living in the States at the time, and she was going through her medical training. And man, residency training in the States is just really inhumane, just working nonstop. And one of the rotations that she was going through was in psychiatry, where she was basically at a psychiatric ward. And at this point, man, her spiritual life was really on fumes because she was just working nonstop, studying nonstop, falling asleep at every sermon, barely able to go out to small groups. She still went to church, she still went to all these different things, but she was basically like a walking zombie. Very difficult, very brutal. But the psychiatric rotation was really difficult because she would see people who just, man, she would have to question, is there hope? Can the gospel penetrate into these lives? And this wasn't just going on for a few months. This was going on for a year, to the point where, as Jeannie and I, we would have moments where we would share how we're doing. She would share with me, in tears, Jason, I don't know if I'm a Christian. I don't know if I believe in Jesus anymore. And yeah, part of me, it really broke my heart because, the foundation of our relationship from day one was the gospel, Jesus Christ. And obviously I was worried because it wasn't just a month thing. It stretched out to a year. And I was thinking, how can I minister to Jeannie? I mean, I could probably give her all the apologetical proofs, all the different arguments, the historical arguments for the resurrection of Jesus, and I could just say all these different things. I could go theological on her and really interpret all the things that she's experiencing and intersect them with sacred doctrines to convince her that Jesus Christ is real. But you know what I did that actually really moved and touched her? Is I said, hey, Jeannie, let's have a time of prayer. And what I did was, Jeannie, for whatever, she's really into stuffed animals at the time, maybe not so much anymore. She's really into stuffed animals. And she kind of rolled her eyes at me like, I don't want to do this prayer schmear thing. Like, it's going to be so boring. I said, no, trust me, it'll be fun. So I staged this room, and I had her favorite stuffed animals sitting in a circle. And I had each one of the stuffed animals share a prayer request. I know it sounds sacrilegious, so please don't do this at home. But I wanted to touch her heart. And how can I speak her language in a way that just doesn't sound like just this trite religious jargon, in a way that's fresh to her? I had each stuffed animal share a prayer request, share their struggles. And yeah, she was laughing, giggling. And through that time, she was able to pray for the first time. And yeah, did that change her heart? Probably not. But what I'm saying is, those little small drops in the bucket, those little tiny baby steps, those are ways that we can become like a Jew, become like those who are weak, become like those who love that happy hour. And yeah, it feels awkward. And at times it feels like, is this effective? But what Paul is saying is, I'm going to do whatever it takes to win people, to convince people that Jesus Christ is real, that his love is better than all other loves. And you know what's incredible about this thing is, yeah, this is Paul. And some of us are thinking, I can't be like Paul. Man, Paul is at another standard. He's at that elite status. I'm just here. But you know what's incredible about the gospel? You read the gospels yourselves. How does Jesus interact with people? When he heals a leper, when he heals a blind person, when he confronts the rich young ruler, he doesn't just do it some formulaic way, the same way over and over again. What Jesus does is he personalizes his encounter with every single person. And that's what Paul is saying. I'm going to personalize my love to the Jews, to those who are weak, to those under the law, those outside the law, and similarly to us. Think about the way that God encountered you. Think about your own testimony. And just notice how your testimony, the way that God relates with you, is so relational, so unique. The reason why Paul goes through such great lengths to become like a Jew, to become like those outside the law, all these different things, is not because he's some people pleaser. It's because he is responding to the way God loved Paul. God pursued Paul in such a specific, unique, relational way, in that miraculous way, striking him blind. And yet, when we see our own lives, when we see our friends' lives, how God works in their lives, do you notice that God is so unique, personal, relational, intimate with each individual? And when we think about a God who is so massively holy, so majestic, truly the king of this entire universe, and yet he cares about your personal idiosyncrasies, that he cares about your personal habits, he cares about your preference, your personality, and he loves you according to who you are. Wow. And that is why Paul is so motivated to do this. Because our God pursued us in this fashion. And that's why Paul goes on in verse 24. He says, not only am I going to become like a Jew, not only am I going to become like those under the law, outside the law, the weak, so on and so forth, but do you know what? He says, do you not know that in a race, all the runners run? He says, not only am I going to become like a Jew, I'm going to be like an athlete because I care so much about this gospel. Do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one receives a prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. In all things, they do it to receive a perishable wreath, which is really like one of those olive crowns. And at the time, that was like the way to signify high esteem, high accomplishment. But he's saying for us as Christians, those who submit to the gospel, we do this for an imperishable reward that is eternal. Therefore, I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body, metaphorically, and I keep my body under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Paul is saying, not only am I going to become like a Jew, not only am I going to become like so on and so forth, I'm going to do this like an Olympian athlete. Man, I love watching the Olympics. Actually, I don't remember the last time I saw an Olympic event, but I love memories of watching the Olympics. And man, that award ceremony with the national anthem, and I see these Olympians, these athletes, so much pride. A lot of times they're tearing up. You know why that's so inspirational? It's because there is a backstory to every Olympian. For an Olympian to train for an event, man, it requires, like Paul is saying, self-control in all things. I was reading up on, I don't know if he's still relevant, Malcolm Gladwell. He's in Ontario. He grew up majority of his life in Ontario. And he was saying that as he was studying people like the Beatles, Bill Gates, Tiger Woods, he says, in order for you to be an expert at anything, you need to spend at least 10,000 hours on that subject matter. So when we think about the most decorated Olympian, Michael Phelps, from what I've heard, from what I've read, from the age of 7, he began training. From the age of 7, in his routine, he would be in the swimming pool 4 hours a day. And that doesn't include other types of workouts, whatever. By the age of 10, he was like a national, like in his age group, he was nationally the best at whatever event. I don't know the specific details, but for Phelps, he would not take a single day off. Birthday, his routine is still humming along. Christmas, it doesn't matter. Weekend, when he's sick, it didn't matter. Every single day, 4 hours. When we think about like figure skaters, gymnasts, man, their routine is incredible because a lot of these people, they still have to go to school. They wake up 4:30 in the morning, 2 hours at the rink, go to school, 2 hours at the rink again. Then they do some ballet lesson. Then they eat a short lunch. You look at their diet, man, they are just eating the most plain vanilla food in order to keep their body in shape. And Paul is saying that is what he's doing. And he's saying, and he says at the end of verse 24, so you also run likewise. And I know a message like this, we're thinking, wow. First of all, some of us may be thinking, oh, I'm too busy. You don't understand how busy my life is. And yeah, I'm sure we are all busy. But it's interesting because even in the busyness of our lives, we still have room to still dip into our YouTube, to dip into Instagram. I mean, for some of us, we are like YouTube Olympians. And I'm not talking about YouTube content creators. Like we still, even though we're busy, we still manage to spend time doing a lot of aimless things as if we are somebody boxing, just beating the air. So yeah, I do want to sympathize. I know we are very busy, but even in the midst of our busyness, man, there is room for us to carve out to be disciplined. I know for some of us, we've tried to become more disciplined, let's say Bible reading, especially at the turn of every year. We start at Genesis and we basically end up in Leviticus. And yeah, it's a tough ride. And one of the things I definitely want to encourage here at Uptown is we want to do our spiritual disciplines, yes, individually, but we also want to do them communally together as well. So one of the specific practical implications for something like this is at the turn of 2020, I've been talking to the officers here at Uptown, to our disciples, and I would love to hear other people's feedback, is we're thinking about doing a Bible reading plan, Genesis to Revelation, in 1 year, as an Uptown community. We're going to do it together. That's going to change the way we do our sermon series. That's going to change the different things that we study in our impact groups so that it's integrated, so that you don't feel like you're doing this on all by yourself, but as a community. But like I mentioned, man, if we really put our minds to it, we can do this. It wasn't too long ago, and I think a lot of the mothers, they're about to finish, the mothers of young infants, young children at Uptown Community, the people who are sitting with you right now, they are doing the 90-day Bible reading challenge where they are reading the entire Bible in 90 days. Some of them completed it in 90 days, others are taking a little bit longer, but they're still going to complete that Bible reading. My wife is part of it, and she loves her KCAL chat room. They're messaging each other, giving each other accountability, asking questions. Oh, this passage is so interesting. I wonder what this means. Or, man, this passage is so encouraging. I can't believe I never noticed this. And one of the things that we want to do is that special thing that the moms are doing, we want to make that an Uptown-wide thing in 2020. So there are some practical ways that we can apply this, but my heart in this sermon is not so much about what can you do to exercise this type of self-discipline. What can you do to be passionate, to be zealous, to seek after God and to advance the gospel? What I really want to ingrain in our hearts and our minds is, do we understand that the passion that Paul exhibits here, that he's exhorting us to follow likewise, is only a dim reflection of the passion that Jesus himself expressed for us? Man, when we think about self-discipline, controlling your body, beating yourself, when we think about becoming like a Jew, becoming like those under the law, out of the law, who embodies all of that? It's Jesus Christ. His passion for us, he did not leave any option behind. He left it all on the table in order to seek after every single one of us, in order to advance the gospel for us. He became weak. You know, some Bible verses to spell this out is Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 to 8. I love this verse. It says, though Jesus was in the form of God, he is God. He did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant. I mean, it's great. Paul became like a Jew. It's great. I became like my coworkers. I became like my wife, whatever. But you know what's amazing? Is Jesus became like us. Literally, he became flesh, taking on the form of a servant. Even though he was the form of God, he took on the form of a servant. Being born in the likeness of men, being found in human form, not only did he come and he walked on this earth in our shoes, but it says he humbled himself, becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross, in order to win us. Wow, his passion knows no bounds, no limits whatsoever. And the song that we sang earlier, I love that song, Jesus Messiah, and one of the lines is, he became sin. What does that even mean? That's not just from a lyric from a song. It's from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. For our sake, God made Jesus to be sin. I don't know how that works out, but when he was hanging on that cross, God regarded Jesus not just as our substitute, but as if he was sin. Why? So that in Jesus' death, we, us, the beneficiaries, we might become the righteousness of God. You know, one of the movies that my wife and I watched together before the kids is Slumdog Millionaire. Has anybody seen that movie? I love that. I know it sparked some controversy because, you know, is it portraying Indian lifestyle in a negative light? So I'm not here or there with that, right? So please don't take this the wrong way. I love that movie because, really because I saw it with my wife. And after we finished the movie, you know, this was a time during her low period, she started crying. And she's not the most emotional type. She started crying, and I was scared. I was like, did I do something wrong? Every husband is like, oh, shoot, am I in trouble? But she started crying because if you know the plot of that movie is there's this one guy, he is like a slumdog. He is like the lowest class. Oh, he's on the lower class, right? No future, no hope for him. But he falls in love with this girl. But the problem is this girl is part of like the gang scene in India. She's heavily protected. But he does whatever it takes to pursue after this girl. Whatever it takes. Puts his body on the line. Wins a bunch of money at this TV show. Does whatever it takes. And if you see the movie, man, it is pretty inspiring. The hoops that he goes through. And Jeannie was crying because she said that she felt so touched because she knew that if I were in the same position, I would do the same thing. And I was like pretty touched. I would have never thought that of myself. And probably she's thinking, anyway. You know what's so inspiring about movies like Slumdog Millionaire is it doesn't point to the passion of your significant other. Your significant other will let you down eventually. It doesn't point to your parent. I'm not knocking on your parents or your best friend. You know what? It's a dim reflection of the passion of Jesus Christ. Every hoop he went through. Oh, we're sinful? Oh, we're defiant? Oh, we turn our backs against God because we want to be rebellious, live our own lives? Guess what? He said, you know what? I'm going to become like you. I'm going to take on your flesh. I'm going to experience your disease. I'm going to experience your pain, your suffering, your sadness, your sorrow, all those different things. Yet he lived a perfect life. The problem is we can't be reconnected to God because of our sin, this rebellion in our hearts. Jesus says, oh, is that another hoop that I had to go through? Guess what? Not only am I going to live a perfect example for you to follow, if you can't follow that because you are powerless, I'm going to die on that cross so that every sin you commit, everything that you do that displeases God, all of that will be canceled. When I hang on that cross, I will be portrayed and perceived by my Father that they had an eternal bond. I will be perceived by my Father as if I am sin. So that when my Father looks at me, he can't help but to turn his back. Which is why Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus was forsaken for our sin. For some of us, we're thinking, okay, that's inspirational, but I still can't, I don't have the power to live like Jesus. I feel like when I go to work, I'm so stressed out. Every time I get an email from my boss, oh my gosh, Jesus says, is that another hoop? Not only will I die in your place, but I'm going to give you my Spirit. So that the wonderful things that I did, the perfect life of righteousness that he lived out, by the Spirit is the same Spirit that he has deposited into all of us. So that we can be, like Paul says, these are not my words. Paul says that in Jesus, his death, his resurrection, that we might become the righteousness of God. Jesus is saying, any hoop, you're a Jew, you're weak, you're under the law, you're outside the law, I don't care. You have a broken family, you have an addiction, I don't care. I'll become like you. And I'll lay my flesh and blood on the line, literally. And this radically changes the way we ought to live our lives. All of a sudden, this idea of being disciplined in our spiritual devotion is not just another sermon on, I need to read the Bible more. But no, it's us responding to the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's us responding to his passionate love for us. And I'll be honest, I'll be the first one to admit, I forget this. I need to be reminded not just every Sunday, I need to be reminded every single day. And it's not just an intellectual reminder. I need Jesus' presence more and more in our lives. And that's the reason why we do communion. And I really want to transition now into our time of communion here. Is, yes, all these things that we talk about every Sunday, we fall short of it. I fall short of it. I'm not preaching this passionately because I got it all mastered. I'm with you. But every Sunday, I come desperately, like a beggar, because Jesus knew how fragile all of our faith was and how all of our faith will be. So therefore, Jesus says, on the night that he was betrayed, his last supper with his disciples, he says, this is my body, broken for you. You can't live this life on your own. And therefore, I'm going to give you my own flesh. I'm not just an Olympian who's beating myself, disciplining my body. I'm going to give up my body for you. As we take of the bread, I want us to be desperately reminded of how Jesus, his passion for us. Don't worry about how your passion lacks. Worry more on Jesus' passion for you, that he would give up his very own flesh for you. And not only that, but he says on the night of his betrayal that this is my cup, which represents the blood that he shed for us, that enables all of us to be pure, to be the righteousness of God. So as we take of his flesh, as we take of his blood, and this is not just metaphorical, Jesus literally laid down his flesh and blood for us because he knows that we forget. He knows that we are powerless to live this type of life apart from him. So I'm going to ask first the band to come forth.